blood concentration of sodium, potassium, and hydrogen ions are all interrelated. If you think back to earlier in this discussion, we talked about some co-transport of different molecules with sodium. We had co-transport, for example, of sodium and hydrogen, antiport, in that they were transported in opposite directions. It's very common then for us to see a relationship in blood pH and calcium levels. Potassium levels. Potassium in particular is secreted into the urine, okay, as we know, in response to those aldosterone levels. But in addition to the secretion of potassium, we also have ion channels or potassium transporters that will actually bind and move hydrogen. We have a competition between potassium and hydrogen ions that exists in the distal tubule. Perhaps not so much in the proximal tubule, but certainly in the distal tubule and in the early parts of the collecting tubule, the cortical collecting ducts. What this means is that when we have conditions, so you want to make sure you know this, in those distal tubules and collecting ducts, early portion of the collecting ducts, potassium and hydrogen compete. What this means is if our blood is acidic, we're acidosis, okay, we have our blood is acidic, that actually takes precedent over potassium levels in terms of priority. Remember, we're always trying to maintain homeostasis, but when our body can't keep everything in homeostasis, it'll often sacrifice the loss of homeostasis in one area in order to maintain homeostasis in another area. And acidosis is a situation like that. If we are acidic, our blood is acidic, we are going to secrete this hydrogen ions in order to eliminate those hydrogen ions from the bloodstream and bring our blood pH back up to that 7.4. But there's a cost to that, and the cost to that is that we are going to inhibit the secretion of potassium. If we don't secrete potassium, then levels of potassium ion in our blood go up, and we become what is known as hyperkalemic. Hyperkalemia can be, we have an ability to tolerate it within certain ranges, but hyperkalemia, being excess blood potassium levels, can cause quite a bit of difficulty for electrical active cells, neurons, skeletal muscle, and cardiac muscle. It's very common for people who are hyperkalemic to have irregular heart rates, for example, because this is screwing up the electrical activity of the heart. Think about why. Okay, I want you to think about why. You have the tools to understand why. Okay, you do. So ponder that and tease that out in your mind and understand. Ask yourself, why would it disrupt those electrical cells and how they contract and how they work? Why would hyperkalemia lead to that? Now, the opposite of acidosis is alkalosis. And if our blood is alkaline, then we need to get rid of, actually we need to save the hydrogen ions. We need to stop secreting hydrogen ions. And so the way that we do this is actually it favors the secretion of potassium. Because of this competition, if we're going to secrete potassium, we're not secreting hydrogen. And so alkalosis favors the secretion and the excretion of more potassium. Okay. Now, what if our blood pH is perfectly normal, but we're hyperkalemic? In that situation, the hyperkalemic is going to favor the secretion of potassium, inhibiting the secretion of hydrogen ions. So if our blood is normal when this all starts, pH is normal, the fact that we're hyperkalemic can actually result in acidosis. Conversely, not written here, but let's add this in, a condition called hypokalemia, which you can guess what that means. Obviously, if hyper is excess blood potassium level, hypokalemia, is blood potassium levels that are too low. Hypokalemia can in turn cause acidosis. So you've got this, alkalosis. You've got this cause and effect that can occur in this relationship then between potassium levels in particular and hydrogen levels. Which brings us to a discussion of acid-base regulation. Just in general, you know that the respiratory system is very important in regulating blood acid levels, blood hydrogen levels. The kidneys assist with this. Kidneys assist with maintaining blood pH by reabsorbing bicarbonate ion. I can draw straight, I promise. There we go. Reabsorbing bicarbonate ion and secreting hydrogen ion. Remember this equation, CO2, I hope it's like branded into your brain by now, plus water gives us carbonic acid, which dissociates to become hydrogen ion, plus bicarbonate ion. As the kidneys increase the amount of reabsorption of the bicarbonate ion, then that bicarbonate ion can combine with the hydrogen ion, and that pushes the equation in this direction. And consequently, we end up producing more CO2 for the respiratory system to exhale, and therefore we lower blood levels of hydrogen ion. But in so doing, we also can, in addition to the respiratory system, we can also secrete that hydrogen ion, making the urine more acidic. Our urine fluctuates, our pH of the urine fluctuates between about 5 and 8. It tends to be more acidic in the morning, and then based on what you eat, it may stay acidic, or it may become basic. In lab, we used to do, and actually it's kind of fallen out of favor, so we don't do it anymore because of some concerns, but we used to do this lab where we would actually have students drink a solution of sodium bicarbonate. Yeah, that looks right. Sodium bicarbonate, otherwise known as baking soda. It's gross. It tastes really nasty. And it'll raise your pH depending on how much you drink. So, kind of an interesting thing to know. Alright, proximal tubules use sodium and hydrogen pumps to exchange sodium. Sodium goes into the tubule, into the intercellular fluid. It's then exported into the interstitial fluid and goes back into the blood. Hydrogen ion, on the other hand, goes the opposite direction. It is removed from the blood, enters in through the basement membrane, and is secreted at the apical membrane into the filtrate, where it will make it into the urine, making the urine acidic. Now, interestingly enough, bicarbonate ion itself can't actually, so we're looking at reabsorption of bicarbonate ion, but we're going to have to play some fancy-dancy tricks to get this bicarbonate ion reabsorbed, because bicarbonate ion actually cannot cross the membrane. So let's take a look at that. Okay, we're going to take a look at that and make a note of this, come back and read this in a second. Let's look over here and see how we do this fancy trick to get bicarbonate ion into our bloodstream. What you're looking at here is two different types of cells. This one is proximal tubule. This one is the distal tubule. Now obviously they're not right next to each other. They've got a loop of Henle dividing them. But we put them together on this figure. I say we like I actually made this figure. I did not. McGraw-Hill put them together on this figure so you could take a look at them and the relationship between them. Let's look at the proximal tubule first. Here's this sodium and hydrogen ion transporter. Note that this is my cell. Let's make it really obvious what my cell is. This is my cell. Which means the mustard yellow region is the lumen of the tubule. This is my lumen. Okay. So, in response to sodium entering into the cell, that sodium, it's not shown here, but that sodium is going to exit and go back into the bloodstream. Hydrogen ion will encounter bicarbonate ion, which is already present in the lumen, to produce my bicarbonate acid. My carbonic acid, will then dissociate to produce my water and my carbon dioxide. Here's how we get the bicarbonate ion into the cell. Water diffuses by osmosis, okay, through the cell membrane. Carbon dioxide, remember lipophilic, right? Diffuses through the membrane into the cell. When we have both water and carbon dioxide in the cell, we're going to encounter the enzyme carbonic acid, which is going to produce bicarbonate, I'm drawing a blank. What the heck is that acid name? Carbonic acid, thank you. And carbonic acid is going to then dissociate to give me my bicarbonate, which is pumped out of the cell into the bloodstream. It's this membrane here that doesn't have any transporters. Okay, it's this apical membrane that doesn't have any transporters for the bicarbonate ion. There are transporters right here on the basal lamellar side. Notice my hydrogen ion, okay, being exported back out. It's a weird thing, but it works. It does the job. We end up with hydrogen ions being secreted. Here's my secreted ions, and bicarbonate ions being absorbed. Now let's take a look at that distal tubule. So keep traveling down the line, and here we have our tubule. Here's my sodium transport. This is just an ion channel that's going to transport that in. Here's my hydrogen ion being secreted. Okay, and here's my sodium and potassium ATPase. Remember, we've got the 3 sodium being pumped out for every 2 potassium being pumped in. Now, phosphate. Okay, phosphate can combine with hydrogen ions to create a weak acid, and that phosphate happens to absorb this hydrogen ion, and we secrete that. We excrete that. It's removed from our body. Ammonia can also do it. And yes, there is ammonia in our urine. It's actually one of the things that gives it the distinctive odor. Ammonia is a byproduct from protein metabolism. We make ammonia, and then that ammonia is actually converted into urea or uric acid, which are less dangerous to us. Ammonia itself is actually quite dangerous, especially when it's in its ionic state, like so. This is just a recap of what we've talked about, and I want you to make sure you read through this carefully and know about alkalosis. We're going to be dealing with metabolic alkalosis when it comes to the kidneys, respiratory alkalosis alkalosis when it deals with the respiratory system. I do want you to look at this. This is kind of a cool thing. If we don't have enough bicarbonate ion, okay, the kidneys are reabsorbing it, but we just don't have enough. We're still acidic. The kidneys actually can metabolize the amino acid glutamine to produce more bicarbonate, and that's kind of a really cool thing. Most of our bicarbonate comes from our diet, and you may have heard of a trend, alkaline diets. Okay, it's kind of trendy these days. Alkaline water is also trendy these days. And the idea with that is to use dietary intake of bicarbonate to help balance the pH of the blood. And sure, that helps. But by and large, pH is regulated then by the lungs and by the renal system. And the renal system is perfectly capable of supplementing our bicarbonate levels in the bloodstream by the metabolism of the amino acid glutamate. And that's it. We're done. That's the renal system. Yay! All right. We'll talk later. Bye.